Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's People Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of December 2025. It's International Day for Persons with Disabilities or Disabled People, whichever model you prefer. So I think we should note that. My name is Jane Burton. I'm Councillor Jane Burton. I'm the chair of the committee this evening, and I'm joined by colleagues on either side of the table from people from Democratic Services offices here, and we have representatives from the University of York for our first item. Unfortunately, Sheffield University have not been able to attend. That's one of the papers that we have in our reports. First of all, apologies for absence. We've received apologies for Councillor Nelson, who is substituted by Councillor Taylor. Nice to see you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Mason will be arriving late. He's let me know that. Apologies have also been received from Martin Kelly, Corporate Director of Children and Education. Next, moving on to declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Waller.
Chair, although already on the register, I would restate that I am a governor at Westfield Primary School.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waller, for letting us know that. Good. And minutes of the previous meeting. Are members happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on 8th of October 2025 as an accurate record? Yeah. Okay, thank you. There is no registrations this evening for public participation, so no members of the public will be speaking this evening. And we're moving on to item 5 on the agenda, York Hungry Minds, free school meals pilot update. And we have with us Councillor Webb, who is Executive Member for Children, Young People and Education, Maxine Squire, who is Assistant Director of Education Skills and SEND. And from the University of York, we have Dr. Anelia Venman, Professor John Hudson, and Dr. Rebecca Kerr. So welcome. And yes, Louise Dye is not able to come this evening. So this last came to scrutiny at the 5th of November 2024, but not at this scrutiny committee. This scrutiny committee has amalgamated 3 committees. So I wasn't chair of that particular meeting. I think actually you were, Councillor Nichols. I did watch that meeting. And that was the meeting of Children, Culture and Communities Scrutiny Committee. So I think yes, okay, yeah. So tonight I'm just going to give it over to all of you to present. I suspect you've got an order of preference already. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just do a brief overview of what's going to be presented to you this evening. So you're quite right that we actually presented the interim findings from the university evaluation in November of last year. Both universities have now completed their reports, and so what they're going to talk through is the full evaluation of the 2 pilot schools that actually started York Hungry Minds. So that's Westfield Primary School, who were focusing on a universal lunchtime offer, and Burton Green Primary, who were providing a universal free school breakfast. Over the year, one of the things that we've also been doing is building on what we've been learning from York Hungry Minds to set some work around tackling school poverty through developing a broader framework of activity. And we've been very fortunate in having some additional capacity through a 0.5 post, a colleague from the Ebor Academy Trust who's actually doing some work to support schools to look at additional actions around school poverty, and he's been joining up that with some of the work that's been going on around school attendance. We've been developing a school poverty framework, which you got as an appended document to the main report. That's got various pillars which allow schools to begin to look at the impacts of the experience of poverty on children who are living in poverty in York. And that allows them to think more broadly about some of the additional actions other than the school meal offer, which help children to feel that sense of belonging in their schools. One of the things that the York Schools and Academies Board have supported this year is some work with Children North East to introduce the poverty proofing schools audits into York, and an audit team of 11 have been trained by Children North East, and they've just completed the training of that audit team to deliver an audit at Fulford School. And that builds on two schools which commissioned their own audits from Children North East. That was Huntington Secondary and Archbishop Holgate School, who found that work to be extremely helpful. It's challenging because it involves a lot of voice work. And from that voice work, then the schools are worked with to produce an action plan around things that will help the school community to make their school more welcoming to families and children who are experiencing poverty in the city. And that will be a whole range of actions that come out of that audit. I think it's a testament to the York schools that they have really focused on wanting to do the rollouts of the work with Children North East. Our model is quite unique in that Children North East have not done this with an entire local authority area in this way before. So there's quite a lot of learning that's coming out of this work as well. The other thing that has come out of the work as well has been a commitment, again, from York schools to introduce a fair access criteria, which favours children who are eligible for free school meals within their admissions criteria. And that is a piece of work that we've been doing alongside the Sutton Trust, who have worked alongside a group, again, from the York Schools and Academies Board to actually get the fair admissions charter adopted across York's secondary schools, and that is now adopted. So it's been written into each of the trust's admission policies, as well as the admission policy for local authority maintained schools. So again, a number of different things that are being worked on. We are working on adopting as well the ARC framework, which is being rolled out by our ICB through a programme of free training, and it just looks at the impact of trauma as a barrier in educational settings. And again, we know that that's really important in removing barriers to learning where children have experienced trauma.
Could I just ask you to explain what RCB is? Sorry.
Yeah, it's the ARC framework is it's a framework which responds to trauma, and it's based around attachment relationships. And I always forget the C part of it. Sorry.
So attachment, regulation, and competency.
And that's it.
And
yeah.
what's that?
Competency.
Competency. Yeah.
Attachment, regulation, and competency.
One of our EPs has been trained as an ARC champion, and we've also got some other members of the team that are being trained as ARC champions. That will go into some support that we do with schools in the new year. So, as I say, a number of things in which York Hungry Minds is a part, but a very important part. We are recruiting the next round of York Hungry Minds schools. And one of the things that I would ask Scrutiny to understand as well is that although there is a national breakfast scheme, we very much see York Hungry Minds as having some unique features which are an enhancement to that national scheme, and really do set what's happening in York apart from that at the moment. Okay, I will hand over to colleagues. Councillor Webb, I don't know whether you
Thank you
want to
very
add
much.
anything.
Thank you.
The only thing I'd say is this was asked to be brought back to scrutiny by Councillor Nichols, I think, following the fact that it had come to previous scrutiny meeting, as you outlined, Chair. And the first meeting that I know some of us were at were obviously very much focused on the findings, the initial findings from the university. And I'm really pleased to hand over to our colleagues now from the university to talk through the final findings. As we've said, unfortunately, due to ill health, we've only got one of the two universities here tonight. But you've got the papers in the pack, and you know, if you had questions on anything, then I'm sure that if you ask those questions, we can find out the information after the meeting if we can't do now. But yes, so guys, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. So the University of York team focused in on the qualitative evaluation of York Hungry Minds. So I'm going to first talk us through some of the initial findings from the previous round of research that we completed in summer of last year. And then I'm going to hand over to Anita, who's going to talk us through the more updated findings from the creative workshops completed with the pupils at both Westfield Primary Community School and Burton Green Primary School. Yeah, thank you. So just to recap on the initial methodological approach. So we completed the fieldwork between June and August 2024, and we conducted interviews across both those two schools of Westfield Primary and Burton Green with both staff and parents. We completed interviews with staff in the broadest sense of the word, so included staff who were catering staff, pastoral staff, class teachers, and school leaderships as well. So then just to recap then on some of the key findings. So first of all, we looked at reaching children in poverty. So the cost of living pressures consistently came up throughout the analysis, with parents noting that the universal free school meals help to ease financial burden of food costs. The universal model prioritises adult reach. And then there's just a quote there from Westfield School staff, which says, "There's a lot of children here as well. It's possibly their only meal of the day." And we had similar quotes as well included in the report from Burton Green staff as well. The second then being reducing stigma. So universalism played a vital role here as pupils felt more comfortable with their food choices, and staff noted that pupils stay in the dining halls for that little bit longer as well, less conscious about what they had in their pack-ups. There's also some discourse on the awareness of putting the two schools under the spotlight, as those two schools were in the two most deprived wards in the city of York. Then focusing in on tackling educational inequalities. Overall, there was a reflection from staff around approved attainment and attendance. And we see that again from the quote coming through there from Burton Green School staff, which said it had an enormous positive effect on attendance. Families that struggle to get the children in on time or in regularly enough. We also had similar quotes as well throughout from the parents, who in particular noted that children were much more happier to go out and go into school, and that it left the kind of rush in the morning was a little bit more calm. There's also greater readiness to learn, and lots of staff put this down to children not being hungry, but also having more balanced meals, less sugar in their packed lunches, etc. But this improvement was not only in the classroom. Staff in particular noted that children were playing nicely at playtime, and that play was more calm, and they came back into classroom, leaving kind of the bickers aside in the playground. And then finally, looking in on practical implementation, there was some rapid implementation. This led to challenges around comms and expectations. And we see this in the quote here from Burton Green school parent, who said that at first they thought it was only for people who were on free school meals. And this led to some recommendations around robust communication strategies moving forward and in reviewing staff levels around dining halls and provision. I'm just going to hand over to Anila.
Thank you.
Sat a little bit awkwardly in relation to the slides. Are you okay? Yeah. I do have them in front of me though. So last time we spoke to you, we shared the research, which was very much focused on the perspectives of staff and parents. And we hadn't commenced the research with pupils and children at that stage. So really, we're coming back today to share those voices and those kind of experiences of pupils and their participation in this pilot and its evaluation, because obviously they're hugely central to its success and kind of what we want to achieve. So at both schools, we designed a series of creative workshops involving children from the ages of 4 to 11. We used a whole range of methods recognised as really valuable for doing research with children and young people. And this included brainstorming, it included kind of methods of kind of traditional drawing, writing activities, collaging, zine making, and also techniques called rainbow and cloud activities, which are really useful at kind of eliciting views for children around the positive and the negative features or kind of experiences of a particular topic. So we used this whole range of different activities. Children and young people had choices around what they wanted to pick. And it was very much kind of being able to elicit their views in their terms, shall we say, in very kind of child-friendly methods. So we did 19 workshops overall across both schools, and in total we again engaged around over 100 pupils. So we're really, that's really positive in respect of qualitative research and that level of engagement. That's kind of a real strength of this piece of research. So yeah, the voices, the experiences of over 100 young people. Their outputs and all the kind of creative activities which I've described were anonymised, photographed, and then they were anonymised, and then we kind of analysed them thematically. And a lot of those themes that arose from those kind of discussions and those creative outputs aligned and kind of echoed the themes in relation to staff perspectives and parents' perspectives as well. And we'll kind of just highlight that through the next few slides. So this slide, ready for the day, really highlights our earlier analysis, which showed how breakfast provision has the potential and, reduced stress in the morning and improves through that kind of provision, helps improve punctuality. And again, this was really reflected in the kind of discussions and the creative outputs with the pupils. So pupils at Burton Green were very aware of how busy mornings can be for families, and highlighted the benefit of having this space in which you essentially don't have to rush. And, for anybody who's kind of had that experience of getting kids to school, we know how hectic that can be within the morning. This was hugely valued in respect of starting the day off in a much calmer, quite supportive environment. So the pupils' artwork and the discussions emphasised especially how Breakfast Club can help manage those hectic starts at the day and ensure that actually really valuably they can eat breakfast when sometimes the home routine might make that really difficult for children and families. And pupils also described how they, looked forward to actually come into school because they enjoy the breakfast that's been offered to them through this provision, showing how it can help support a calmer and more positive start to the school day. So the next slide is kind of really eliciting the views of children's perceptions of cost in relation to this type of provision. And across all workshops, pupils showed a real clear awareness of the value of money and also the emotional, relational impact of potentially not having enough money within the family context. And some children spoke about feeling sad if money runs out, and others also explicitly mentioned liking Breakfast Club because it's free and because they do not need to pay for food. So again, that kind of awareness of kind of food insecurity and kind of the wider cost of living crisis and financial hardship was coming through indirectly through that artwork and those discussions with the pupils. And this really linked to those kind of broader themes of affordability, again, the cost of living crisis, children also recognising that not everybody eats at home in the mornings, with one year 5 group in particular noting that Breakfast Club matters if you don't get food at home. So again, that kind of that awareness of food insecurity really coming to kind of the foreground of a lot of those discussions. And again, staff across both schools really echoed the importance of this, emphasising the role of that provision in essentially addressing food insecurity in their local communities. So the next slide around good learning kind of emphasises how children across both schools linked food directly to energy, to concentration and good learning, showing that strong awareness of the importance of healthy eating, essentially. And the creative work with the pupils referenced feeling much more ready to learn after eating, which aligned to the staff and parents also reporting about that kind of reduced energy dips and that smoother start to the school day that we mentioned earlier. And pupils were often very expressive about the quality and the choice of food that was on offer at the schools. And they discussed quite in animated ways their favourite items in a lot of detail. And again, they're kind of really encapsulated in our report. And we've been really quite, we've made sure that the final report includes a lot of those kind of that imagery of kind of really encapsulating these kind of themes through the voices and the experiences of the pupils. So again, kind of the pupils are drawing attention to kind of good or healthy foods and pupils kind of highlighting their desire to learn and their understanding of kind of nutritious food being kind of a mechanism to support learning, essentially. So the final slide just highlights again the kind of the broader kind of social and emotional kind of impacts of this type of provision on children and young people. So we're looking at kind of their perceptions of kind of friends and food much more broadly. So again, that creative work and those discussions linked and highlighted to the kind of the value that was placed upon universalism. So within the artwork, many of the pupils depicted themselves, and you can see that in this slide, sitting with friends whilst eating, and described how it was good that everyone could access free school meals, especially at Breakfast Club. And again, this linked to staff and parents' accounts that shared meal times really encourage pupils to try new foods. And some pupils especially described how proud they felt in being able to kind of have the opportunity to try different foods and be quite adventurous. So both schools illustrated, again, those kind of what, you know, you were talking about earlier, Rebecca, those kind of broader well-being benefits, pupils enjoying that calm, kind of social environment of Breakfast Club in particular, and children at Westfield School emphasising how they really like to sit with their peers and kind of enjoy that kind of shared lunchtime activity. And again, the provision also created those really valuable opportunities for kind of social interaction, for play, for kind of supportive engagement with trusted adults and teachers in that kind of very informal environment, which was really critical, especially through the accounts of teachers and parents of the wider challenges those communities were facing, being able to have those opportunities to kind of respond more holistically to the needs of their pupils. So really that just broadly encapsulates some of the main findings that very strongly echo the findings, the themes from parents and staff from the interim report, but very much through the voices and the experiences of the pupils who are central to the provision.
Thank you. Do anybody else? No, okay. I think the part of the report from Sheffield looked into the beneficial properties of this on attendance and learning. I don't know if anybody wants to go over that at all, or Councillor Webb, would you like?
The only thing I say is sort of what I said before. I think the findings are there, report is there, and it is a shame that colleagues from Sheffield aren't here. Leeds, sorry. What might work is if people have got any particular interest in any of the particular points there, is I'm sure that at some point they'd be happy to arrange some sort of follow-up, maybe not in a formal meeting like this, but for members of the committee to ask questions or anything. I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, so Louise Dye, who led the work from Leeds and Sheffield, and unfortunately not well today, she said she'd be happy to correspond by email later on. I mean, maybe we could say we don't want to speak for their bits of work, which were a different methodology with the quantitative methods. We coordinated at the start with the different methods, so we weren't overwhelming the schools, but then we went separately with these bits of research, and as we reported last year, the findings from both the qualitative and the quantitative research, they really reinforced each other in terms of the messages, which is really important to see that. And the key takeaways that the Sheffield team put together on the back of their slide deck, maybe summarise all this. It really echoes really what we've reinforced with the rest of the qualitative work. But as you mentioned, the positive things there, we can see the impact on attendance and punctuality in particular coming through in lots of the data points that they've collected. I mean, there's probably another slide we thought is particularly key in their slide deck is we can see this sort of the breakfast pilot, the punctuality split by free school meals eligibility, which really shows a clear effect of the policy intervention here. So echoing a lot of the things that the parents, guardians, teachers and the children themselves were saying to us in the qualitative work. So yeah, hopefully that comes through with a very brief summary, some of the things that are in their slide deck.
Thank you for that. It's okay. So thank you very much. It's really fascinating to hear about. As a teacher, I have encountered breakfast clubs 25 years ago, would you believe? And I saw the very positive effect it had in a very deprived area. And all these things, and it's great to be seeing it rolled out. Personally, I think having come across it in a state time when it was very rare, to see it rolling out, and I think it's great that we've been ahead of the curve in York as well. It's quite exciting, and especially in a place with the Rantry Foundation and all the things that go with it, and the City of Sanctuary. So it's a really good thing. So over to the committee for questions. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and the related papers. I mean, for me, the case for this sort of policy intervention is strong. I actually think it's a shame that it needs to be made in the year 2025, but we are where we are. My question is more about what happens, let's say, in 2 or 3 years' time. So there is this national commitment with the breakfast clubs. what they call it, the National School Breakfast Programme, is that right? Sorry. I guess I've got two questions which are linked, and I should know the answer to the first one, but I can't really keep up with various government announcements these days, and you're never quite sure if what you're reading is exactly what is going to happen. Is the rollout of the breakfast clubs nationally going to complete? Do we know if it's going to be a complete rollout? I know they're going gradually with it, and if and when it does complete, how do we envision that will relate to the resource that Hungry Minds has? Might we do something where we, instead of obviously focusing on a handful of schools within the whole city, would we then effectively have breakfast clubs plus, where every school has got effectively an extra % more provision via Hungry Minds, but across the board? What's the current thinking around that? Does that make sense?
It does absolutely make sense. And one of the things that's happening, obviously, with the national scheme is that they're doing quite a lot of test and learn as well. So phase one from the early adopters, where they just invite at schools to express an interest and get involved. They've done some learning about what will work in that school context, particularly around learning from the feedback of schools around the funding of it, which they've already committed to adjust. The phase two is actually they're inviting schools with 40% plus free school meal children to take part in the next phase. So it's a more targeted phase, is phase two, with a view to learning some more from that and then going for a full rollout in phase three. So we also as well met with colleagues from the Department for Education back in the summer who were leading on the National Breakfast Programme, just so that our schools could actually talk to them about some of the learning that they'd taken from the pilots. So some of that information that those schools shared, I can see the way that it's actually influencing the way that the programme is actually being developed. What we think about the scheme here in York is that it's a definite enhancement to that national scheme, because obviously that national scheme has got some quite set parameters to it, particularly about being clear about the offer also includes some childcare, which obviously we're not mandating in the York offer, which makes it, I think, more accessible for schools to develop their offer, because we are helping them to work with us on what will work in each school's context, rather than saying it has to definitely look like this. And I think that's what's unique about the York Hungry Minds scheme, in that it's working with the context of each school and helping them then. And again, we've learnt this from the work that the colleagues have got out of the schools about being better around the communication of it and how we can actually work alongside them to make a scheme that works for them. And I think that really is what's different in this context. I'm sure Councillor Webb will want to say more about that.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting. We were ahead of the curve in York. I won't say too much, but essentially, you know, government's following what we do these days. It's great. I think there is a clear difference between what's happening in some of the schools we've been working in and what's been happening in some of the sort of the national programme. And I think you're right, Councillor Taylor, to sort of say if this rollout does happen, firstly, that will mean that, you know, we've delivered free school meals in all schools in York if we get there, and that's a real positive, right? That's something that we should be really proud of. I think on top of that, we're trying to get schools to commit to sort of maybe 3-year programs really with us. It helps for funding, it helps for us for building up program and sort of saying, right, how do we get donors to commit funds? If they know it's a 3-year program, that helps. And therefore there will inevitably be some overlap. And where that overlap occurs, what we're offering, as Maxine's outlined, is an enhanced and slightly more bespoke offer. Because, yeah, the thing that we've learned through this process is that every school needs something slightly different. And I think that's what we're offering here.
Thank you. Would you say that's what your enhanced offer is then? That you've tried it and it's tested?
Yeah, I think the enhanced offer that I've seen really from York Hungry Minds is probably the types of food that are on offer. I think that's a positive. And I know the University of Sheffield did a lot of work around nutrition and things like that. The timings as well, I think, is key because they are quite fixed. It's half an hour with the national scheme, and this is a bit more flexible. And also, different schools will need to work with different children. So in one school, it might be a universal offer where everybody turns up, and that's exactly what they want. In other schools, it might actually be better to work with a specific group of young people to engage them first thing in the morning, support those young people in that community and get the most out of them. So it really will depend on the schools, and the schools know their children best. So yeah, that's sort of what I see. It's a bit more flexible.
I love the idea that children were trying foods that they would not necessarily try themselves, and that they were sitting and chatting with their friends rather than sat watching TV and eating food. Because I was a French teacher and I had a French mother ringing me up and saying there's something wrong with the family that my son's staying with. So they don't eat on the table, they're all watching television. And I had to sort of say, well, I'm afraid that's what a lot of people do. They were just horrified, and they were a working class French family. So interesting from that point of view. Right, I'll put you on my list. Sorry, I'm getting a bit carried away. I'm quite fascinated by all of this. I think it's great. Councillor Nichols.
Thanks. Sort of two sides to this. The first bit is on the study. Reading the slide, there was a lot of mention about breakfast. Was the difference between breakfast and lunch noticeable, that there was more interest and excitement about breakfast and getting the kids in than lunch? And from statistics, obviously, I don't think you'll know, is what happened after lunch, because obviously registers are taken throughout the day, so was there a difference there? But you may not know that bit. Was there any bad comments? Because it sounds brilliant and everybody said really positive stuff, but I'm not saying I don't believe you, but was there anything negative at all apart from the stigma? And was the stigma just for those there who felt it, rather than, did you find any evidence from anywhere else across the city that people were looking in? I mean, I'm not from these places. I didn't look in thinking, you know, there's a stigma tag. So was that a real stigma, or was it just a perceived one themselves that they just thought everyone was looking when actually we weren't? So that's about the study. Looking forward, my frustration with all this is that kids only start school once, they're only in reception once, and all this, and it's brilliant you've got a 3-year programme, but it needs to go at a pace that if the kids get a bad start, that first year is never repeated. And if they start with bad things, it's hard to break them out of it. So in terms of going forward, do we have to go at the government's pace, or can we go fast as we have been and ensure that we keep ahead of the game and actually we don't lose those very early years where the most influence on kids' education happens? Thanks.
Thank you. And just to kind of, I think as well, refer back to what you mentioned, Councillor Burton, it was interesting because it came up in the report as well that some of the staff were saying that pupils went home to their families and demanded they ate at the dinner table with their knives and forks. So it was interesting to see that come through even now. In terms of negative comments and stigma, whether that's real or not, I mean, I think a lot of this came through in comments from staff, in particular when it was comments on things like articles in the York Press, where people would be leaving quite negative comments underneath, describing, I suppose, pupils, families, etc., in not very nice terms. So I think that stigma maybe came through in that way. And in, I suppose, the self-perception that would align with kind of receiving those types of comments. Staff were very wary of trying to manage some of that comms. But I don't know that that fed into the pupils. Maybe Nita can comment more on that. In terms of any other kind of negative comments that came out from the staff or parents, there was some comments around, I suppose, a deviation perhaps in how the funding model would look like moving forward. I think initially at the doorstep, there's maybe some parents who's mentioned that, you know, maybe if they don't necessarily need the universal provision, that they would perhaps be able to kind of contribute in funds towards a provision for other students, but maybe they don't need it themselves. So perhaps that was, I guess, slightly more negative. But in terms of the provision and the food being provided, I don't think that there was negative comments throughout the report. It was generally seen as quite a positive thing by staff, parents and pupils.
Yeah, just kind of adding to kind of the experience of stigma. I think what came really strongly through the report was it was provision which mitigated against the experience of stigma, and I think the parents and staff could really see that kind of come into fruition through that type of provision. And I think, you know, the experience of poverty in the context of the cost of living crisis, and the communities, kind of the neighbourhoods, levels of deprivation, they were kind of particularly aware of kind of the importance of kind of mitigating against or dealing with those kind of needs, but also mitigating against stigma. And you know, there's huge amounts of research with children about their experiences of poverty and deprivation, and that's not just material, it's about the emotional and the relational aspects of that. And schools are often shown as kind of key environments or sites where children make comparisons, and kind of, you know, stigma and kind of feeling excluded is kind of really felt.
Do you want me to have a go at the second bit?
Or just the first, was it on the lunch and breakfast? Was there?
Yeah, so I think the two different types of provision that are quite unique. So you're not comparing like for like, they were both felt positively. And I think, you know, Westfield School definitely kind of saw the huge value in that lunchtime provision being there, and were worried about that being taken away. So I think that was a really strong theme that came through. But Breakfast Club it's unique in the sense of, well, children are going to be there at lunchtime, but not all children were necessarily coming through the door for the Breakfast Club provision prior to this pilot being in place. So it was seen, both of them were seen hugely positively, but in unique ways.
Yeah, just on that, I think if you look at Annex A that looks at the model about supporting poverty, you see that actually was a real need, sort of the universal free school lunch. So we've taken a sort of a, you know, the best possible option for supporting and making sure we get the most sort of nutritional food into children. But actually, if you step down that ladder almost, that breakfast offer is the next best. Just on your point about speed of rollout and keeping going, yeah, no, it's frustrated me that we've not done more schools. We've now, as you know, set up the Your Hungry Minds steering group. The steering group receives applications, and they meet termly. And essentially then we're in a position where as a steering group, we can marry up the application with the funding that is available. It's all generated through donations. We've got a fundraiser who's raising donations as well, separately. And then when money is available, we can then expand the programme. And we're confident that at our next meeting in January, we have got a number of applications, and we're confident that we'll be able, in a position to approve several of those. So we will be expanding at pace, much a better pace than the government's managing at the moment, if you think about it in terms of percentages, and hopefully we can continue to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, and then Councillor Runciman and Councillor Mason.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. It's fascinating to hear the outcomes as it was last time around, because I was in the last committee where you presented. And like Councillor Taylor, there's a very strong case for the free school meals, as I think we'll all accept. I suppose one of my questions is around, so I am quite interested about this relationship, because there is a national scheme now and the local one. It's good to hear that there's a sort of bespoke offer, and it's really responding to what's going on in York and the schools in York. But I suppose some of the similarities is that schools need to build capacity, and I'm just wondering whether there's ways in which, you know, the two schemes can help with that, or whether there's a dialogue going on. And I suppose on from that, my sort of question is also around, you know, the long-term sustainability of it. We brought this up before, and it's just to understand a bit more about that, because there were some concerns from residents, obviously, that it's just going to stop and it won't continue, and that's going to leave them in a worse position in many respects. So just a little bit on those, please. Thank you.
As I said, we are keen to keep the dialogue going with colleagues at the Department for Education, so that we can work in tandem with the schemes. What we're very conscious of is that very often things that get rolled out nationally, York doesn't benefit from quickly. And so we're wanting to keep the momentum going on the Hungry Minds scheme, because, as I say, what they've set now is eligibility criteria, which is set above the level of free school meals for all of our schools in York, including our most deprived. So that in itself would have meant that in round 2 we wouldn't have had any eligible schools. So it's really important that we're keeping, you know, that work going within the city. And also what we've committed to is sharing information as well with the national scheme, so that they're learning from the things that we're encountering as issues that need to be overcome, so that can influence as well when there is a big, you know, a more comprehensive national rollout, that becomes more sustainable as well. Because obviously there's only ever a commitment to the life of a particular political group. And what we're wanting to say is that actually this should be embraced as an all parliamentary focus, really, if we inherently across all political parties believe that this is a good thing for children in the country, then York's got a role to play in getting its voice in there and saying, why does this matter and what difference does it make in the longer term? For myself, I would like to see that it gets extended as well to the early years of secondary, because, you know, children at primary are experiencing this, but does it help them with the process of extended transition? Because, you know, one day they're going to a breakfast club and the next day there might not be anything comparable. Although I do know some of our secondary schools do have a breakfast offer, but I do think nationally that's important in terms of supporting those early years of secondary school, when we know that attendance dips after year 7.
Okay, Councillor Runciman.
Thank you, Chair. This one is mainly for Maxine, actually. I'm going to comment on 2 questions, Maxine. The comment is, Margaret Macmillan knew that you had to feed children or they wouldn't learn, and that was rather a long time ago, which Barbara Mance will be very familiar with, as I am. And the questions are these. After COVID, there was a tremendous problem getting children back into school. Do you think that this scheme has helped to get those children back in more successfully, particularly the breakfast club? Because you can't teach anybody anything if they aren't actually there in front of you. And then the second question you might like to tag on afterwards is there going to be a longitudinal study which will look at whether this affects SATS results? And I would very much hope that there will be, because yes, it's very important for socialisation, it's very important for health, but it's also very important for cognitive development. And I'd like to have a report later on that explains some of that.
Yeah, the work that we've described as part of the school poverty framework, Martin Kelly, our corporate director, does actually want to look at how we do a longitudinal study. So that is the plan. Obviously, we've not talked to colleagues anywhere at the moment, but we do feel that is a really, really important thing. So it's not just the impact on SATs, but also the impact on longer term outcomes. You know, sort of, are you less likely to be neat as a result of this as well? In terms of the COVID question, Burton Green would definitely say that they have seen an impact on seeing children that were struggling with their attendance. And our other school that it's been extended to, they specifically targeted children where they were worried about their attendance, again through their breakfast offer, and that has proved to be very, very successful. So one of the lovely things at Burton Green as well, because certainly when I've been there and had a look at what's happening, it's the fact that you're seeing children from different year groups actually interacting together. So you see them sitting alongside each other for their breakfast. They're playing board games together. They have got jobs which you know they share out amongst themselves. So the older ones are helping the younger ones with the tidying up, and it's having some really big social benefits where you're actually seeing them naturally just sitting and talking together, whereas you wouldn't normally see that. They'd be very much in their year groups. And they're not at Burton Green, that they just mix over breakfast. And that's really nice to see.
It's incredible to hear all these things. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Runciman. Councillor Mason, then Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies for being late coming from work. It might have already been covered, so again, apologies if I missed something and I've missed it in the papers. But it was saying about the expressions of interest, and I think there've been 6 expressions of interest for the next stage. And I just wondered what the barriers were for the schools, and you know, why is it not every school clamouring to do this? Feels like it's a kind of, you know, like we said, all the things we're getting from it. Why is it not just de facto we do it, basically?
Yeah, some of it is around things like not having enough staff hours available, and so I think as we are working through and people get more confident about how the model can work, then yeah, I think that will start to change, to be honest. The other thing that some of the schools were initially worried about as well was the access to the kitchen if they've got a catering provider. And you know, so that catering provider needing exclusive access to be able to put on the lunchtime offer. And so more work needs to be done around that, and obviously we are trying to engage with the catering companies to help them to feel more relaxed in terms of sharing some of that kitchen capacity. But yeah, what we're looking at is how can we start to work a bit more proactively to support some of those logistical issues that both the national scheme and the York scheme has.
Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions from me, please. I'm looking at the graphs and scatter charts on pages 28 and 31 of the pack. And it's very interesting to me that the outliers and the breakfast plots are much further away from the line of best fit than they are in the visitor line of best fit, given what I think if you can impute it, it's fairly obvious that in the lunch pilot, the outliers are much nearer the line of best fit. And I don't know whether you've got any indications as to why that happens, or is it just a question of some children get up earlier in the morning than others do? And my comment on it as well is that the lunch pilot plots are very, very coherent, very cohesive, whereas there's much more scatter in the breakfast plots, and that's perhaps what you may want to comment on. Thank you.
I think this is the Sheffield research.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can, it's a good question, Councillor Cuthbertson. I'm going to employ my statistical understanding here. So I think we're firstly with the breakfast pilot. I mean, it will be interesting really to sort of look at how that's progressed over time, because I think what you're seeing there obviously those dots are sort of individual children as far as I can tell. And what we've got is, what I'd probably say around this is it's highlighting exactly what we're trying to tackle, which is that some families really do struggle with that early morning routine and getting into schools. Whereas actually, if you look at the second set of data on the lunches, the statistical outliers, standard deviation is a lot smaller, isn't it? Because obviously they're already there, right? So the uptake is much more consistent. So yeah, I think it's certainly a point to think about, is actually why is it that we've got some young people who are really struggling to, even though it is there, it's available, that they're not taking up that process? And are those young people not taking up the process, but then getting into school? Because one of the things that I heard from the head teacher about this breakfast pilot in particular was that the young people who are typically always the ones that are a little bit late, and you know, we all know those people. There's always someone who's a little bit late to everything. If they were going to be late, they're late to the breakfast club, which means they're there for the first lesson, right? But they can still get fed. We can still find something to eat, but they're there for numeracy because they were late for the breakfast club. So that's a positive. That's anecdotal, of course, but yeah, it's a really good question, actually. How do we make sure that we're catching everybody? Because it's always good to do something universal, because you are going to catch the majority, but you know, really target it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Taylor again.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate you coming back to me. Got two unrelated questions, which I'll fire out quickly, and then I'll keep my mouth shut for this item. So first question is around this 0.5 FTE role that's working with schools on poverty. I'm going to sound really cynical when I ask this question, and I'm not trying to be rude. I'm trying to sort of get to the answer that I'm seeking, really. I'd be interested to know, what impact is that role having, or is it too early to say? Are schools actually listening to this person, or is it another one of these sort of very fluffy positions that you often see in the public sector, where host organisations feel good about having them, but they're not actually delivering that cut through on the ground? And that sounds awful the way I've phrased it, but I trust you'll see where I'm coming from. And my second question is around the funding situation for Hungry Minds. I'm not necessarily after a specific figure, but obviously there's numerous schools applying. How are we doing in terms of the fundraising? Because that is hard. Whether it's this campaign or any other charity that's trying to raise money, the funding environment's probably never been as difficult as it currently is. So how are we getting on there and ideally with as many tangibles in the answer as possible? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll deal with the impacts of the post first of all, and what I can say is that the tangible is that our officer has been into the majority of schools now, because he's actually been known to them previously in supporting the termly attendance meetings that he has with every school. And what he's done is he's expanded that termly attendance meeting into also having that discussion about school poverty. He has been pivotal in turning more expressions of interest into Your Hungry Minds. So it's as a result of him going out and having those meets with head teachers that we've got more expressions of interest in. And that is an example of that impact. He is also part of the Poverty Proofing Schools audit team. So he is actually out there working with a multi-agency team of people who are doing those audits. And that is informing the work that's going on around how we turn those audits into actions. So there's some really clear impacts already from what's taking place, because what you've got at the moment is you've got a diagram that shows a high level framework, and what he's turning that into is a citywide action plan, which is then being tailored for a response from each of the schools, so that we're then able to gather in and see what each school is doing in response. So one of the things that I've tasked him with is bringing me some case studies of best practice that are already happening out in our schools, and we don't always see that at city level. So we are going to be publishing those case studies so that they're more effectively shared. So, because very often people think, well, the schools aren't doing anything. They're doing loads. It's just that we're not able to see it in one coordinated way. And having that extra capacity is allowing us to do that. I'm going to hand fundraising over to Councillor Webb because he knows more about that at the moment than I do.
That's really kind, Maxine. Yeah, no, fundraising is, you're right, Councillor Taylor, is a really challenging landscape out there. We have, to be honest, what we've been relatively static with the funds that we've got in recently. And part of that reason is because we've been almost waiting for the process of getting the steering group going, getting the applications in so we can start to match donors to applications. That's progressed. And actually what that's resulted in already is, well, we've increased our promised donations considerably is what I'd say to that. I don't want to go into numbers. I don't think that's fair because I'd be making them up if I knew them, right? And then we've also invested in fundraising capacity in order to try and push that even further. Because that is going to be what makes or breaks this. It's whether people genuinely believe that what we can add is positive and people want to support it. So that is always a challenge. So please, it's coming up to Christmas. If anyone wants to donate, search Your Hungry Minds online. Councillor Nichols is always good for a tenner, but yeah, no, it'd be great. But yeah, so we always need more funding, of course, but actually we're probably in a more set up place now to actually receive money and then do good stuff with it. So and I think that's really positive.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Maroney, then Councillor Nichols, and Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd like to pick up a slightly different thread. And I'm going to be very naughty and merge the two research projects, and you can throw my question out if you so wish. But there was quite a lot of noise locally, especially in that bastion of objectivity, the Evening Press, about it being a terrible waste of public money giving children who didn't need a free meal a free meal. And the evidence, certainly from the quantitative research, suggests that all pupils benefited. And I just wondered if your qualitative research highlighted why the, dare I say, better off pupils benefited as well. Did you pick up specifics? Thank you.
Exactly. That's probably too many of us comment. So I guess the key thing that was, it's in the slide deck really, but we covered it more in last time's presentation, but it's there in the one this time as well, is some of the benefits of the universalist approach comes through in the school, the whole school environment that we've been talking about here, and particularly you can see that in the drop off in the levels of stigma as well. So I think they're the two key things, and that definitely we feel comes through in children's own voices speaking about this. So I think that's where we get the answer, is to look at those benefits from a universal approach in terms of what it does to the school environment. That was clear for both when we talk to children, the participatory work, but also when we talk to teachers and parents. Those themes came through pretty strongly. I think that people could see the benefits of it being a universal model rather than a targeted model. I don't know if colleagues want to add anything. I think I've captured that now.
No, I think that kind of captures really, in a nutshell, the kind of the main benefits of it being universal. And I think it was from the children's perspectives, having that understanding that shared space and kind of being together and kind of the change in kind of atmosphere and social environment was clearly beneficial for everybody involved in that. And I think you discussed that, didn't you? For your kind of experience of the Breakfast Club. And I think, you know, one of the things that we did do as a research team is we visited, not only did the kind of creative workshops, but we did visit the Breakfast Club quite regularly, and also the kind of the lunch period as well in the school. And we could really see that kind of social environment and facilitating kind of really positive relationships. But I think for the Breakfast Club in particular, it was notably calm and a lovely environment actually, where different years did mix together, and it kind of enabled that kind of you know, staff and pupils to kind of have those conversations around, you know, pupils' needs in a much kind of safer, informal environment outside of that traditional school context.
Has that answered your, yeah, it's a good question. Councillor Nichols.
Cool, thank you. Just sort of following up from that, what Maxine said about the deprivation index is a measure, but the benefits when you read this is nothing to do with deprivation. It's to do with, you know, I'm very lucky, middle class school. My daughter mixes with year 5, 6, and she's only in year 3, 4. So the benefits, I don't see why the government or anybody would base it on deprivation. It's about preparing children for the future. So hopefully that will always be at the forefront, not how poor are you, because the value of money doesn't change whether you're rich or poor. In some ways, it's harder teaching my kids Christmas doesn't mean you get everything on your list. So I think that's, but the other thing is, and I don't know if it's part of this sort of follow-up, but when it's what you said, Councillor Burton, that when kids go home and say to the parents, why not? Are we able to support those parents by helping them answer the questions? Because it may be they don't know the difference themselves. If you know what I mean, the reason the kids may be struggling is that the parents and the environment they're not used to either. So is there a way that we can engage to support them as well?
So it's a really good question. I mean, there was one thing that came out when I was talking to the catering staff at Westfield who've been delivering the free school lunches. One thing that they talked about was getting children to eat food that they hadn't ate before. And I think, Maxine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the head cook there actually produced some sort of almost recipe cards at one point that she was giving out to parents, because parents were asking, the kids come home and said they want this and I don't know what this is. So, and that's a real positive, right? So that's one example of that. But you know, it's certainly something that, you know, schools are about education. They will work with parents however they can to support their family.
For a long time, the cook at Westfield as well, prior to York Hungry Minds, was actually running sessions for parents. It's been one of the things that they've done for quite a while. I think the other thing is that we know that, you know, sort of we're doing some work as a local authority soon around our Best Starting Life plan. And part of that will look at the home learning environments and family learning. And that I think also gives these opportunities to join up some of the work that we're doing rather than seeing it as all separate initiatives.
Good, thank you, Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. I think the question is to Maxine, because I'm grateful you did find a place for the school inclusion and belonging conference, because many of the issues that you've raised here today, I was able to hear, and I think that's important. Looking at the reports, I think since the interim came, national policy has moved, and just as there was universal Key Stage 1 preschool meals, there's now more national money to provide more free school meals across all schools, because I think within the ward there's been an issue of, if you are a Roman Catholic family, for instance, you wouldn't have benefited from this, and there are many people who their children go beyond the ward boundaries because they don't see them as hard and fixed as we councillors do. So it's understanding how that system will merge with this, and to take on board that, for instance, Westfield kitchens benefited from a refit with the Key Stage 1 free school meal, and it's big. Not every school will be able to flick the switch and provide a scale up because of some capital will be needed. So that there is that aspect to it. So we just need to understand what happens next in order that the maximum number of pupils benefit from what because the national money is significant relative to what can be raised locally.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor Waller, and I absolutely agree. The big thing about the national scheme is that it will still be inviting schools in. It won't actually force them to deliver the national scheme. And some of them will still opt not to. And that's because of the way that it's got certain requirements within it. What we know from the scheme that York on Green Mines is developing into is that it will help some of those schools that might see the national scheme is unachievable for them because of their circumstances. And what we'll be trying to do then is target work with them to encourage them to become a York on Green Mines school, to help them to deliver something that works in their context and their circumstances. There are also as well, you're right about the fact that, you know, sort of some of our schools have had more investment in their kitchens than others. So that's also been one of the things that has been thought about as schools have come forward with expressions of interest. We thought about their state of readiness, and our school catering advisor has worked very closely to review their kitchen capacity, just as she did when we had the Key Stage 1 universal free school meals rollout originally. And so it's providing that advice and support that helps schools to get ready is really important as part of this, of what we can do locally in York to make the most out of the schemes that are available, whether that be York on Green Mines or whether it be the national scheme.
Okay. Right, I think we've had quite a session. I think we could go on for a bit longer, but we shouldn't. We're keeping these people waiting at the back of the room. So today we were asked as members of Scrutiny to support the work of York on Green Mines project and the school poverty framework, and to note the benefits of both to tackling child poverty in York. And the reason was that the work described will provide valuable support to low-income families and ensure that more children are able to have barriers to educational achievement removed so that their long-term outcomes are improved. And I think from what we've discussed today, we see how incredibly rich and varied just a project like this can be. It has so many benefits on so many different levels. It's quite incredible. You know, the social benefits, calmer, readier to learn, less sugar in the pack up, energy from food, that they're cost of living awareness, money awareness, people getting to school. They might be late for the breakfast club, but they're there for numeracy, friends and foods and shared meal times. It's just an incredible array of things. And we're actually influencing government rollout of a national scheme. So I think we should be very proud in York to have this. So thanks to all involved in this, and please pass on as well to the people in the canteens rolling out the food on a morning at lunchtime too, because they're as integral as anybody in making this work, all the staff at the schools. And thank you all for coming this evening and providing such a fascinating insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. As I said, we will take away the longitudinal ask as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. would anybody like a few minutes break before we go on to the next part of the meeting? Are we okay? You want to, yes. I think this one will be a short. Yeah, sure. Sorry? I don't know whether it is or not, to be honest. I think we're just having a couple of minutes. We're just missing Councillor Cuthbertson. Can we carry on with that, Tim? Shall we wait for Councillor Cuthbertson to come back? Sorry? We'll be back. I'm sure he'll come back. Okay, so we have Councillor Webb again. Maxine has swears that she's left now for this part of the meeting. We have welcome, is it Barbara Mans from Head of Education and Support Service. Welcome, and Dawn Wood, Early Years Reforms Programme Lead. So good evening. Sorry, I haven't met you before.
Thank you. We've actually got different job titles. So I'm Head of Early Years and Childcare Service, and Dawn is the programme lead for the reforms for early years and wraparound. And we've moved service from the 1st of September, just gone. Yeah.
Apologies for that. I've been given the wrong information. Okay. So would you like to we've been asked to note the content of the report, including the related national policy developments. So we're just going to hear from you, ask some questions and see how we go with it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you,
Would you
Chair.
like to? Yeah.
Thank you. So in summary of the paper, it's an opportunity to update you on the progress of the early years and childcare, the wraparound reforms, and some other related policy announcements by the government. Over the last 2 years, we've been in a period of gradual rollout of new early education entitlements, and these have been for working parents, and we've been growing the market to meet that new demand. And there have been some key target dates set by the government. The first one was April 24, when eligible 2-year-olds, that's of working parents, became entitled for 15 hours of early education each week. In September 24, children from 9 months up to 3 were entitled to 15 hours each week. And from September 2025 just gone, children from 9 months to 5 years went from 15 hours to 30 hours per week. So it's been a substantial expansion and down to a much younger age range as well of the entitlements. September 25, that's been a key milestone nationally and locally for the new and expanded entitlements. And in order to grow the market ready for September 25, we were awarded capital funding and we received 333,000. And that was to cover wraparound expansion as well as early years expansion throughout the growth period. And we also had access at the same time to Section 106 contributions from the Chocolate Works development to create new early years places for that rise in need coming out of that development. And a revenue allocation of 579,000 from the DFE. And that was to expand the wraparound market with an expectation that there should be breakfast from 8 o'clock in the morning and after school provision until 6 o'clock at night.
and those revenue costs would cover staffing, utility costs and other start-up costs and expenses. And since we've been to Scrutiny, we updated you the last time, there have been a number of significant national policy developments, and these are still related to the reform work that we've been doing. The overarching one is the Best Start in Life. And as part of that, we've had the school-based nursery programme announced and the free breakfast clubs. The school-based nursery programme meant that we had one successful applicant to the national programme in round one, and that was Popperton Road School. And they set up a new nursery from September just gone. It was done in a very considered way, with the DFE consulting the local authority on our view of sufficiency and need in the local area, because there's a wish on both sides that we minimise impact on existing good and outstanding provision. We don't want to displace the market because we need that consistency and continuity for parents. And in round two of the national programme, that's underway for the school-based nursery programme, but it's unlikely that York schools will meet the criteria because, again, it's based on high levels of free school meals. But possibly when we get to round three, which we launched at some time in 2026, more schools will have the opportunity to apply if they wish to do so, but we'll still be looking at the sufficiency need and making sure that we don't displace the existing market. And outside of that school-based nursery programme, academy schools can at any time approach the DFE to see if they want to consider lowering the age range to take younger children. And more recently, we had Naesmire that's spoken to the DFE and they've had it agreed to lower to 2-year-olds. And there is another school that's in dialogue at the moment with the DFE. Another significant announcement is the free breakfast clubs for every primary school child. And in York, we've already got one early adopter, and that's St Paul's Primary School. And they started their offer in May this year. The next national round for expressions of interest of the breakfast provision is open, but again, unlikely that York schools would be eligible because it's 40% free school meals. So it'll probably be that third round where schools may want to consider that opportunity, but certainly very mindful of the impact on existing paid for breakfast provision for working parents, and making sure we've got really good sustainability to keep our provision going longer term, and making sure we've got that good join up with York Hungry Minds as well and really best fit for an offer. In terms of delivering the early years and the wraparound reforms, the work has been at pace against very tight national deadlines. It was a very ambitious programme, and specifically for early years, we did create overall sufficient places across the city for that milestone in September 25. And some of that has been a conversion because parents were already attending for those hours, but they'd been paying, but it became fully funded through the entitlements. But some new parents have been taking up their eligibility for the very first time. Some wards do have less availability, and because of that, we want to increase choice and flexibility for parents. And we still continue to create new places in those priority wards. And particularly for under threes, we need more places across the city. It's the same for wraparound, and we've had some localised gaps which we're addressing from the revenue funding that we've been awarded. And we've also had the closure of Hemplin Kids Club, which I think was just over a year ago, which has now been replaced by York Explorers, and that was funded through the revenue programme. Going forward, summer 26 is going to be a pressure point for us, not just locally, but nationally as well for early years, because that's when playgroups, the day nurseries and the childminders are at the fullest before children move on to school. So we're in preparation for this by continuing with procurement and tendering rounds using the capital allocations, and we're constantly analysing the market. We also work closely with our providers across the city, And they've always been very responsive to that new need that's coming through, and they've made changes themselves without any of that capital injection. And they will do room configurations where they can and change their staffing models. So there has been quite a bit of change across the city. And for early years, what we've seen is an increase of about 167 places to date. And with wraparound, we had a target from the DfE of 390 places to be created, and we've already achieved 348. But there's still time to go to the end of March to complete that programme. We submit regular progress updates to the DfE on both wraparound and early years, and they are satisfied with our progress, the progress that we've made and that we continue to make. And they also recognise that nationally, while September was a very key milestone for them, they know as well that summer next year is the real pressure point across the city, because it's the same for every local authority. But we still have a few months left to work on that sufficiency. And I think key for the local authority is growing the market in a very considered way that gives it the best chance of longer term success, particularly when we have it's a very difficult operating environment at the moment. It's so challenging for them. And without displacing that 100% good and outstanding provision that we've got across the city at the moment. And we do want children to be able to have that very best quality and that best start in life, whilst the parents are able to access that childcare. It's available for them, it's consistent, so that they can go out to work as well. But we're also very mindful of sufficiency for the disadvantaged twos as well, because they've not been, all of this growth has been about working parents. So we're very mindful that we must keep an eye on making sure they've got enough places across the city, and they're not displaced by that expansion. And we've included within the paper more detail about the expansion that we've done over the last 18 months with early years and wraparound. And we're very happy, Dawn and I, to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Or we have to go.
Yes, certainly.
Yours without, doesn't it exist, Brooke? And you said you have them without, is it yours without? Oh, right, somebody will have to give me the page, page 51.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I think it stretches across the two wards, doesn't it?
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I assume that's the one in front of what was Burnham School.
That's right.
So that's why it's so big.
Yes.
Right.
So
and
it's
I
been
think
a like-for-like replacement, but they're actually doing breakfast for the first time. They've had quite a bit of appetite for breakfast.
Good. And now you'll both have to forgive us because we've got to go and do 9 lessons and carols, and we're very sorry.
Okay. Have I got any questions from the committee? Councillor Nichols.
I think you've actually almost answered it by the fact you could actually explain what was in this report, because it was incredibly difficult to follow best start in life, school-based nursery. I mean, I was going through circling every EYEG, NICs. I mean, it sounded like from your presentation that you actually do understand the most ridiculously complex system that seems to have been set up of, here's a bunch of money to help you look after kids, but we're going to make it as difficult as possible and create as much bureaucracy as it's to do, just waste the money that could actually go to kids. It sounds like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you know, are you actually absolutely on top of it? Because it sounds like you are, and we are delivering, and by those numbers, you know, 348 as opposed to 390, doing the best we can in the circumstances of government that decides, and probably the previous one as well, to make life as difficult as it can be for people trying to look after kids.
You're absolutely right. It has been difficult challenging to make sense of what's been coming down from the DfE to make it work best locally. And trying to join everything up at the same time. The example is the Section 106 money, and that's come in at the perfect time. So we've made sure as part of that tendering that we're doing that, and it's got the same emphasis around inclusive places for early years. It's just adding to that sufficiency picture. And then Dawn is doing all of the externally assessments from the data that we get back on occupancy, and also looking at the birth rates that are coming through as well and the vacancy levels. So it's trying to balance, it's a complex picture, it's trying to balance that and make best sense of it with what's coming down from DFS to what works locally for us.
Thank you for saying that about there's so much going on, because actually the childcare sector right now, there is so much going on for them with the school-based nurseries. We've had capital grants thrown at them. There's been Ofsted changes thrown at them. We've had new statutory guidance thrown at the sector. So there is a lot going on in this space right now. Thank you for noticing that.
To follow up, in terms of, we can't control the government, you know, but is there anything that the council could be doing to help in terms of doing what you do? Is there, you know, could you be saying to, you know, the exec member to say, actually, this is, would be helpful, we could do this, because we are dealing in such a minefield of, you know, awards and grants and such like.
I think it's always been an issue that it's been historical underfunding for the sector. And they are struggling because the opportunities that they had for their business model to make charges, say for the younger children, they've lost all of that now because it's all funded through the entitlements at particular rates. So it's very hard to make their business model work. So any sort of elevation of that issue about historical underfunding is really helpful going forward.
Councillor Webber, you wanted
Sorry,
to
I
add
didn't
something?
want to interrupt you there, Barbara, but it was just something else that I think it was when you chair of the Children's Scrutiny Committee, there was, when you last presented childcare sufficiency, there was to talk about how we help parents to understand all of the changes. And I probably declare an interest here. I'm going through exactly this right now. I'm filling in many codes that I get from the government for various things that you have to take one code and put it into another form. It's not straightforward. It was slightly embarrassing when someone from the sector rang me up and says, I think you've got this wrong. What do you do again? I was like, yeah, I'm sort of technically responsible for it. But anyway, we did look at how we can almost do a frequently asked question thing for parents and things like that. So I think that that's something we looked at, and maybe we need to think about how we do some comms on that and advertise it a bit further, because yeah, I think that's definitely needed.
But what they've also done is they've launched a new Best Start in Life website, because the DfE, they recognise how complicated it is for parents. So we're hoping that makes a bit more sense for them. But they've also recognised in the Best Start in Life strategy, again, how complicated it is for parents. And they're talking about a review of the way all the entitlements are delivered, but we have no detail about that at the moment. But they also want to give a stronger role to local authorities in market shaping and working with other key partners. And I think we're pretty good at that in York, and we've got good relationships with the sector, you know, to do that nudging and shifting in the business support that Dawn does as well. So we can feed into that at a national level. And I'm also, I represent York on the DfE Primary Age Steering Group, which is a national steering group. So I can feed in a lot of the good work that we do in the city and some of the lessons that we have that we can pass on. And we do hear early about some of that thinking that's going on.
I've actually got a question which I noticed, because on page 52 it said there was very low take-up of one-to-one support for nurseries. And I wondered how to encourage businesses to take up that support that exists, because I get that things are changing at a very rapid pace. But I honestly think for parents and for children to have this provision, and you know, I've lived overseas where this provision is just taken as normal for years, and I don't know how people have managed in this country with the level of bills that they've had to pay for nursery care, and why people have children, and it's just dedication. Because, you know, I mean, we're talking about poverty and all these things. It's been so hard. So now we have a scheme that's giving something positive for children and parents. and it's also giving jobs to people who are working in this sector and providing business for these businesses. But it made me think, oh, what a shame that they're not taking up this one-to-one support that's on offer. So I just wondered, how do we increase the take-up, and have you got any thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, so kind of two parts of that one. The first one around ensuring that the families can navigate their entitlements, because their entitlements are very, very complex for families to navigate. My team get phone calls from families that are very confused very regularly. Because there's different elements for whichever pot you fit in. So we've got the disadvantaged, which is now not called disadvantaged, it's called families receiving additional support. So that in itself's been another change that the government have kind of put in there quite recently. So what was previously known as a disadvantage, we're not known as that anymore. So they go down one route, the working families go down another route. If you're not a working family and you're not a disadvantaged family, you're eligible for just universal hours when your child reaches 3. So there's still lots of different routes for the families. So that's very complex. So my offer, and I think I said it last year, is actually if anybody wants me to come out to a surgery to help the families to support navigate all of those different entitlements, more than happy for myself or one of the team to come out and do that. So that's that kind of element of making sure, and we have a strong comms campaign with our internal comms to make sure that we get that message out. But it's only, families don't always hear the right message at the right times, do they? And a message is only resonate at that point that you need that information. So it's new families all the time. So that's kind of one element of it. And the business support, we've actually since in February, there was a revised statutory guidance around early education funding. And in that revised guidance were some stricter restrictions around what the providers can charge for. That's thrown a little bit of a curveball for the sector this year, hence why we've had to put a lot more support in for business support for our childcare providers over the last year, particularly since February. So that's gone out as a general offer to everyone. Anyone that's expressed an interest that they need business support, I offer that again. And we are putting on additional training in the new year that will cover things like recruitment and retention. It will cover financial forecasting, it will cover business planning, it will cover marketing. So we're trying to capture all the key elements to support the sector as they navigate themselves around this new statutory guidance. And kind of just say there's probably another statutory guidance coming up next February. So just as they get their heads around and they navigate their statutory guidance, I think there'll be some more changes coming for them next year. So we do a lot of sustainability work with our childcare providers.
Oh, I'm not criticizing you.
No.
I'm just wondering how, is there a way to get that information to the people?
Sometimes they don't know they need it until we can kind of get in there and do that one-to-one. And sometimes it's around that individual conversation and them approaching me to say, I need that support. And then being at that position to ask for help.
Thank you
answered
for that. Councillor Mason. Thank you.
Thanks. I suppose it's more a comment really, and just off the back of that, I think that'd be my biggest concern is just sustainability of providers given all these changes, and everything else is going up in terms of inflation and wages and things that maybe we can't have that much control over. So I think everything you're doing is fantastic, but I do genuinely think in a year to 2 years there'll be problems caused by this change, which is a positive change in terms of more free childcare, but I think the people delivering it are going to be struggling in a few years' time, if not now.
Okay, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to sort of follow up on what you were getting at, Chair, with regards to sort of helping people access the support that's available. We're thinking about Holgate Ward. I know I'm biased, so I apologise. In trying to keep up with the landscape, I'm vaguely aware that the ward at least was a priority area, because in terms of needing more places for young, toddlers. But what's confused me is next to knowing that, I also know that there are providers in the ward who are telling me that they're not getting enough numbers through. And I know some of those providers have had other issues alongside pure numbers. So I'm a bit like, on the one hand, we're told that we need more places available in the ward, but on the other hand, pre-existing providers are saying they're not getting enough through. which is making me think around the comms point and engaging with parents. And I'm not going to get the job titles correct here, but like when you have a kid, and I've recently had one myself, and you get your health visitors and NHS are involved. Is there a way of like working with those partners who are also involved in that early childcare journey to make sure kids don't get missed or forgotten about with a sort of lowercase f, if you know what I mean, so that we might be able to identify exactly where these families might be who might not be getting the childcare support that they are entitled to. It's that classic thing, isn't it? The people who often need help are often the hardest to identify. Maybe there's joint working already going on, but just be keen to get underneath that a bit.
Yeah, there is joint work going on, for some time actually with the health visiting service, the Healthy Child Service. So when they have their regular checks, you know, for under twos, it's something that they promote as well as part of their communications with parents. But also we have 2-year-old data that comes to us from the Department for Work and Pensions.
Right.
We can only use it for a certain length of time, but it means those most disadvantaged families we can try and reach, and we do that through the Family Information Service, through the Healthy Child Service, and we do different ways of trying to contact those families. And we do have good take-up, but there's always a percentage that it's more difficult to reach. And there'll be more work under Best Start in Life to really drill down to that even further with some of those community partners that could deliver those messages for us. There's definitely room for improvement, I would say.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Yeah, I would also concur. There's quite a lot of it's dense and complex, and lots of changes, and obviously they're evident in the report. I suppose the only thing that I kind of wanted to tease out a little bit, and it kind of refers to what has already been said. It's really about recruitment. I know my young one's 11 now, but I mean, even when she was in a toddler in nursery, it was quite hard for providers to recruit and to retain staff. And I'm just thinking that doesn't sound like it's gone away, that it might have actually worsened in the current situation. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about what might be in place to help support that, the providers, and how much of a challenge I suppose we might think it is and is likely to be. Thanks.
Yeah, it still is a challenge. It's been a challenge. It's a national challenge. It's not unique to the childcare. What we do to mitigate that is that we are working strongly with DWP. We have a really good link in DWP that supports our work. She was new to York about the same time as I was, so we've forged a really strong link together. And what we do is we meet termly, and we hold recruitment sessions in the job centre termly, and our quality team go out to support anybody that's wanting to work in the childcare sector. Interestingly, what the DWP did just in the summer, they did a survey with all of their claimants around who was childcare qualified and who wanted to come back into the childcare sector. And I nearly cheered when she told me that they'd actually had quite a high percentage of people wanting to come back into the sector. So we are doing a big piece of work to make sure that everybody that filled in that survey, we don't lose them. I think that it won't be as big as everybody that filled in that survey won't come back into the sector. So we do that one piece of work. Also, Jo, that leads on our quality, she works with our universities to make sure that everybody's coming through qualified and can take up posts straight away, because obviously people that are coming through qualified, not necessarily the curriculum that they've covered, makes them ready to work in our childcare sector. So she's doing a lot of work with the universities to make sure that those people are ready to step into work. A couple of things that we've noticed are barriers is people are moving out of York because of the cost of living crisis. So we know that this is not going away. So any one person that we get in the sector, we cheer. We've got some settings that have got really good retention rates on their staff, and we've got some settings that are struggling to recruit. So it does vary across the city.
supplementary. So those ones that are managing to retain, as some sort of best practice that has been shared between, you know, amongst providers, and that I suppose the council, CYC, can support in that sort of endeavour in that.
Yeah, and then what we will be doing is when we roll out the next set of recruitment training in the new year is we will be covering retention in that as well, and how kind of pinching those lovely ideas that of retention. But some providers are just naturally better at it than others, just because of location or lots of different reasons. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know whether, you know, that could be covered in this one-to-one business supports. And how, you know, why, there must be a reason why some are better at retaining than others, perhaps. Maybe not, but yeah, it'd be good if they could cross-fertilize a bit and find out what good ones are doing, and why they're doing it. Yeah. So I think you've had quite a few recommendations from us. I think with the comms and getting, we appreciate how difficult it is for you, and we're very appreciative of what you are doing, because I think, you know, when you're seeing, when I've read the report and I was thinking, ooh, 390, but you're only at 348, but you're still a way off there, and you're doing so well, because it is so difficult to recruit and organise all of this. So thank you for all your hard work on this. I'm sure we all really appreciate it. And I'm sure there's little toddlers and babies and parents will also appreciate it in years to come, because I'm sure it'll have a positive impact on the world, on our future. So thank you very much for this evening. And we look forward to perhaps meeting with you again in another, maybe, I don't know how long, a year or so, or maybe if it less time, find out what's going on. Yeah, but thank you very much for tonight. Thank you. Yes, it's okay. It has. Right, okay, so we're now moving on to item 7 on the agenda, new housing tenancy and rent policies. And apologies, colleagues, for having to wait so long. We have tonight with us Councillor Pavlovic, who's Executive Member for Housing, Planning and Save the Communities. We have Dennis Southall, who's Head of Housing, Pauline Stutchfield, Director of Housing and Communities. Welcome back. Andrew Bebbington, Housing Strategy Officer, who I think you wrote the report. Yeah. So the policies have been brought to the Committee for Pre-Decision Scrutiny input ahead of presentation at an executive member decision session currently scheduled on the Executive Forward Plan for 20th of January 2026. And I can just say over to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this, as you say, is part of pre-decision scrutiny, and we are genuinely interested in the feedback of scrutiny members, so we can feedback to the final decision session. You've got a well-matured offer here in terms of the tenancy policy and strategy, and then early sight of the proposal around the rent setting and service charges policy in here. Just to outline, as it states at paragraph 2, it's a legal requirement for local housing authorities to publish a tenancy strategy under the Localism Act, and is an expectation of the regulator. It sets the expectations for all social landlords in the city to take into account in their tenancy policies. The final draft proposed for approval, as I said, is quite matured at this stage, because we do
engage with tenants and other stakeholders to get to this point. And you've got the feedback within the report from those groups and any changes that we've made as part of that process. And this is a further part of that process. And this includes the registered providers with homes in the city, as well as our own tenant scrutiny panel. As I mentioned, it's also proposed to develop a rent setting and service charges policy, which will follow on from the tenancy policy strategy, so it all fits together, to setting out the council's approach to implementing the government and regulatory requirements for the housing revenue account rent setting. This at this stage is a set of principles or draft principles in line with government long-term plans for housing. And it's there in order to create financial capacity to build new homes and invest in the quality of existing homes. This is not a final decision on rent setting for next year. This is part of setting a policy approach, which will be used in the short, medium and long term. So on that note, I'm going to hand you over to Andrew, who's going to talk you through some of the detail.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so just picking up on the government sort of 10-year plan for investing in social housing and both improving the quality of existing stock and delivering more new social rented homes and other affordable housing. I thought it'd be worth just adding a little bit of context briefly to the report around the impacts on rent. I think we're very committed to retaining social rents on existing homes that are that are meaningfully affordable, as well as making sure that all the new homes that we develop have are meaningfully affordable as well, and that's reflected in the proposals. So just starting off with the social rents under the government's proposed rent setting changes in the future. There's a reference, I think, in paragraph 16 in the report to what the government calls rent convergence, which is some increase in social rents that are below what they call a target rent towards the sort of the social landlord sector-wide norm of social rents. So in some cases we've got tenant rents that are a bit lower than that. Those proposals from the government are still they've run a consultation early in the year, and we've not had the final response back yet. So it's really quite an early sight, I suppose, of how this might work out. But looking at existing rents in City of York, tenancies often ranging from around £90 a week for one-bed flats through to £118 a week or thereabouts is often a typical kind of rent for a four-bed house. So that if the sort of potential £2 a week maximum increase above the sort of normal annual increase was applied, that would take it between around £92 a week to around £120 a week. So then comparing to private rents in the city of around £190 a week for a one bed up to £382 a week for a four bed, the social rents would remain below 50% of market rents on those measures, and often comfortably below. So I think that was just really to give a bit more information about the potential changes that we're still awaiting more direction from the government on, and that we'd still have to take a formal decision on ourselves as well. But yeah, it would still retain social rents, below 50% of local market rents as things stand, and for some types of property very significantly. And then just noting on the City of York living rent, which is looking a bit further afield at other types of tenure that can support sometimes greater acceleration of new build homes. And this is something that we'd look to see other registered provider partners as well as our own new build developments, and that we would use in reference, you know, for any rented affordable homes that weren't for social rent. That is looking more in the bracket of sort of 45 to 65% of market rent. You know, depending on the property type and the particular, you know, sort of like location and circumstances of the homes. But so that was just to try and, you know, just to try and maybe clarify a little bit and point some things that would be included in the final report around, you know, the differences between social rent and how the City of York living rent will be applied to other tenures, and how that compares, you know, with offering much more affordable homes compared to local private market rents. Okay.
Right, that's okay. It's like playing bingo here. Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Mason.
Cheers, Chair. Unless any of the officers wanted to say anything more, I'm sorry, I'm
Okay.
backseat chair in here. Forgive me. I'll
Not
shut
at
up.
all.
Appreciate the words on rental policy. Thank you, and the context provided. You know, I know it's not entirely comfortable for everybody, but I think it's about time social housing landlords were given a bit more flexibility to sustain what they do, because it was quickly becoming quite bleak as a sector. My question isn't really about that though. It's more just about the input of the tenant scrutiny panel. I know that they've had input on this, which is good. I'd just like to find out a bit more about what material changes their input led to. Were there any things that they suggested that the council couldn't really go with? And also, how representative is this panel? 3 in 1, I suppose, but then that's probably my lot, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is it a supplementary?
Well, I thought if I might as well say it now, then you can wrap it all in. But I suppose I had some similar questions. Just again, you know, how are they picked? Where do they come from? Do they represent every ward? All those type of things. So if you could, some of those things will overlap. If you can wrap it all together.
Great minds think alike. So Councillor Clark, having all
Sorry, it
those
wasn't about the
moments.
tenant scrutiny so much about the registered providers, because it said no substantive responses. I just wondered what impacts that might have on the policy and the sort, and I guess it's kind of wrapped up in the same sort of thing really, in what challenges that might present later down the road if RPs don't buy into it, is my question, which is kind of linked in some ways as well.
Yeah. Councillor Waller, are you okay to wait, or would you like to throw your weight? Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just picking up on the tenant scrutiny panel discussion on the policy. Yeah, so first of all, I should note that the rent setting principles that's planned to take to the tenant scrutiny panel next month. So we've not had any feedback on that as yet. So yeah, I think there wasn't any huge concern raised. Yeah, just thinking back, I don't think we don't think there was anything raised that we didn't accept. There was a few helpful points that the scrutiny panel made. I think about the sort of relevance to antisocial behaviour policy, and a couple of sort of points of detail like that. But I think there wasn't any major divergence of views on this policy. Certainly, having presented a few other things at that panel, there is often some lively discussion that is great to get, you know, people sort of experience and you know, that we do use in developing sort of policies and strategies. In terms of the membership of the panel, I know that there is a lot of work goes on to to sort of support tenants to get involved and be engaged, and the support that goes into tenants joining the panel. I haven't got a lot more information personally about about the makeup of the panel. I don't know if that might be something we could sort of find out.
Pauline.
Chair, if we can supply that information back to the committee.
Sorry?
Is it possible for us to supply that information back to the committee?
At a later date.
Just as a brief thing, was it 5 people, 20 people? You know, how big was that meeting you had?
Yeah, sorry, yes. The last time I met with them, it was I think there was four people there. This one went to a panel a little while longer ago than that, but yeah, they bring a huge amount of specialism, experience and expertise, and sort of bring contacts from the local communities as well. And then yeah, just picking up on the registered provider partners. Yeah, I think it's it's a good point that they they've had a chance to input into this. I think and we didn't get a lot of response. I think largely they might see it, that it's sort of it's pretty well recognised good practice, is what we're proposing, and we have a lot of contacts actually with registered providers on sort of development specific matters. We'll discuss when they're working with developers on planning applications, or whether they're the developer directly. So yeah, it might be reflective that they feel like they've got a good chance to engage with us on how the strategy is applied in practice as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, just to point out that this sort of builds on an existing policy that's been in place. You probably picked that up from reading through, since the Localism Act 2011 required the strategy and policy to be in place. So, it's all very familiar stuff to them. I wouldn't expect a lot of feedback on it, to be honest with you. It's very much day-to-day stuff. We've just updated it. There aren't huge changes within there. It builds very much on what existed already. So that's not entirely unusual or something that we wouldn't expect.
From the registered providers, that is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a strategy. They have to have reference to it. It doesn't bind them to anything. So that's the relationship between their tenancy policies and this strategy for the city. But certainly in our wider negotiations and discussions with other housing providers in the city, would make them aware of that through new developments, and help them with getting to the point of delivering affordable housing and our expectations around rents, etc.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot in these. And I think the consultation does worry me, having lived through many meetings, as Dennis, you will, of the Federation of Residents Associations, and the breadth of experience that brought on more minor policy changes that were very much debated before they reached the point of decision making, and benefited from that lived experience. So I think this is missing. I think in terms of asking people to pay additional rent, and I think those who don't qualify for benefit would feel that they are being penalised more. They would ask, well, what are we getting for our rent now? I think there are issues in terms of service charges across a wide range of different council properties that people certainly come to me, and I'm sure they come to other councils and say, well, what are we paying for? How can we see a return on that? Estate improvements, I appreciate there's a paper coming forward on estate improvement, but that was the context of the place that they live in, and also maintenance and inspection. There's some substantial works to improve housing, the fabric of the building that's done, but unfortunately contractors are not always held to account for what they've done, and sometimes it needs undoing and doing properly. So I've got many more grey hairs than when Lowfield Green started, but in terms of ensuring that there's value for money, for the additional rent that's obtained in order to invest in affordable housing. I think we'd need to see that demonstrated. And I'm saying we, the broader community. So I think there's a lot of aspects that need to be covered on, if you're taking tenants on a journey to an increased rent, I think you need to bring them with you in terms of what this additional charge will deliver to them as an existing tenant and future tenants in the city, so that there's a demonstration that this is a policy that works. But I think before you reach that point, there needs to be a more fundamental approach to that. There's two residents' associations in Westfield Ward. They hadn't been consulted, and they clearly weren't one of the 4 people who were on this panel. So I'll rest my case there. Thank you.
Any comments on that, Pauline? Sorry.
Thank you. I think Andrew said that he attended a panel with 4, but not particularly this one, but we will get you details of the panel. I think there's a really useful comment there around maybe going into more detail in the final decision paper around exactly what feedback has been given and what changes have resulted. I think it's fair to say there's a summary in this paper. You haven't got that detail. And I think absolutely, Councillor Waller, we ought to be telling residents what we intend to spend the money on and what our priorities are. We are developing a housing strategy that will start to cover our, longer term ambitions around housing the city, and we need to be able to fund that. Now, whether that's maintaining houses based on our stock condition survey, or whether it's building houses, or whether it's responding to things like all of the developments that we need to, the government are bringing in, that we need to respond to, whether it's Decent Home Standard 2, AWAB's law, regulatory pressures, development cost increases, all of those things. I think we do need to explain to residents why we do need to increase rents to be able to respond to all of those issues. But fundamentally, the two key purposes are to maintain homes to the standard that we're required to maintain them to keep them safe, and also build new homes so that we've got enough capacity of affordable housing in the city for those who desperately need homes. But thank you for those comments, Councillor Wall.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pavlovic, you wanted to come back on this.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a really interesting point, and I suppose it goes to the question of why do we have council housing? We have council housing to house those people that are most in need of safe, warm housing. What do we deliver? We deliver below market rent, and you've heard from Andrew that we're talking about, in some cases, 40% of market rent. No maintenance costs. We'll replace your kitchen, we'll replace your bathroom, we'll repair your pipes, we'll replace your roof. Don't expect you to pay for any of that. That's part of the rent that you pay. So that's what we deliver for the rent that we charge. And this year we put £12 million into repairs and replacements, and an additional £7 million, correct me if I'm wrong on that, on reactive repairs. So I think in total it was between 18 and 19 million pounds a year we spend on maintaining and updating our properties. So I think if you live in a council property, yes, we don't get everything right. Yes, we have to maintain those properties to a good standard, and also monitor the contractors that we use, which we are doing, and for that, you know, we want tenants to contact us. We did a stock condition survey, and I know I'm going over things that are already been discussed in previous scrutiny committees, but I think they bear repeating. To identify those areas that investment is needed in, including those that may have reached the end of their life, but not at the time that we'd anticipated. So it may be that they need replacement earlier. And so we've been able to identify a programme of works, including in dring houses, for example, and I know I keep mentioning this to Councillor Fenton, you know, we are making significant investment into updating kitchens and bathrooms in dring houses earlier than their normal life cycle of 30 years. So I think we are delivering a great deal as an authority, as all authorities do for their council house tenants, and that's whether they're on benefits or whether they're working.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. I guess, if I may, more of a comment than a question. I think Councillor Pavlovic's right to highlight all of the sort of good stuff that the council does as a landlord for its social housing tenants. I guess what I'd say is, it touches on the previous point about the tenant scrutiny panel. I think there's a potentially an issue around resident engagement and placing all those good things in the context of council funding generally, and also general members of the public's low level of awareness of all those ins and outs and which bits of the council begin and end here and there. And that's probably where some people get alienated and annoyed when they see costs going up and it's not obvious to them why. And I'm blurring agenda items, but I would like on the work plan, well, I'm not on this committee, I'm a sub.
Go ahead.
I think it would be helpful
Sub.
if there was a specific item on resident engagement, well, tenant engagement from the council across the city, looking at both that scrutiny panel, which, you know, I was a little bit unsettled by the lack of detail in the response on that, but also residents as a whole. Social housing providers do resident engagement as a norm. It's a function. You know, they have newsletters or what have you. Maybe we have similar, but there's probably a lot of very good practice here in York that we could learn from the likes of Roundtrees, who I know take it quite seriously. But that's for another time. But I think that would be helpful in my view.
Thank you, Chair. I think you make a really valid point. There does need to be more engaged and inclusive information sharing. But you know, we are reaching out to tenants. So, for example, and I'm sure I will be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but for the first time, we had a tenants panel interviewing for the assistant directors post, and as well as stakeholders, to say, look, you know, we are your employees essentially. We want you to be engaged in the process of appointing somebody. It's good to know that the person that we did appoint came top of the tenants engagement interview panel as well. So, but you know, it is a valid point. I think there is a fundamental lack of understanding of what the council does, what it does do, what it can't do. I mean, I'm just engaging, just as a complete aside, with a campaign that wants us to bring rent controls in, and we just don't have the powers to do that. Much as I may want that, we don't have the powers. So it's about explaining what we can do, what we can't do, and perhaps a more fundamental message about the positive things that we can and do on a daily basis. Dennis, as part of his tenancy work, every day will be making decisions about accommodating people that are in emergency situations. I mean, I'm sure you can talk about that. But when we look at the tenancy policy, as opposed to the rent policy, which is also in the paper that you're looking at, these things are really, really important because it's the policy that underpins the strategy that is important. And I had some feedback. Well, I don't understand what a difference between a policy and a strategy is, from a member of the public. Yeah. And sometimes we do get caught up in that type of jargon. But the policy will underpin the strategy in a nutshell.
Very good. Sorry, Dennis.
Yes, just a little more on the sort of engagement front. There is quite a lot that already goes on. We do have a tenants newsletter which goes out periodically and provides them with information and opportunities for engagement, and we actively encourage that. So the tenant scrutiny panel, I've just been invited to an event in March. So they've invited me along to that to talk specifically around sort of housing management issues as well. And as Andrew says, he's going along in January, I think it was, wasn't it? As well as that, we have a list of people who don't want to come along to a meeting, but are willing to receive policies, strategies, information on topics that we want to consult on. And we're always encouraging people to get themselves onto that list as well. Quite often, that's the way that people want to be consulted through. We've done focus groups over time around specific issues. For an example would be on the back of our annual tenant satisfaction survey, which has been running for decades and has key questions in there which we've tracked through over those decades. We do that annually. So over time, we've taken particular areas or issues out of that and done some focus groups around that. I remember one year we did some work around our independent living communities because the feedback from that was pretty negative. So we did some follow-up work around that and were able to respond to that quite effectively as well. We're hoping to, from next April, build on the work of the annual tenant satisfaction survey. So by doing some more transactional consultations, so that's for, simple things like text following up repairs, the sort of stuff that you get if you receive a service in the, from your bank or a private company. So we're moving into that territory as well, and follow-up phone calls as well. So we'll be engaging people to actually phone people up and get some feedback in the here and now rather than doing it on an annual basis, which should give us a much clearer picture of how people feel about the services that they provide as well. So there's quite a lot that goes on. We don't, it might be useful to showcase that as has been requested there, and I'm sure we'd welcome the opportunity to do that. And I'm sure maybe some of the residents involved in that might be willing to come along and take part. I've been contacted recently by some local councillors who were asking about whether there was anything like the Federation, because the local RA have said we'd like to, get together with other resident associations and talk across the city about some of the issues that affect us. Also, we gave a little bit of advice on that and offered to put some messages out to RAs. And I also talked about it in the context of the emerging neighbourhoods model as well, because I think we need to be absolutely mindful about that and how residents can feed into that as well. So, it is, as Councillor Pavlovich has highlighted, an ongoing thing. One of the biggest areas for feedback from residents is our complaints and compliments system. So we actively encourage people to give us feedback in whatever form, And we analyse that and we pick out themes and we develop on that as well. So again, that's another way that we're constantly getting feedback around that. And there is quite a lot of positive feedback that we get, as well as the the complaints about when we're not doing quite so well, or when somebody isn't happy with the service that they've received.
It's good to hear. Now, I've got Councillor Waller has waited, it's supplementary, okay.
I mean, that's all great, Dennis, thank you. But this is scrutiny. I know Councillor Pavlovic is, he made positive noises to what I said. Be useful to know from you, despite everything that you are doing, which I'm sure is positive, are you open to this council working differently and doing things better? Do you accept that we could do things better and differently if the right ideas with resources come about? Because if you're not, and you think what we're doing is sufficient, we might as well not bother coming back to scrutiny on it, because we do that a lot. So I think it's important that the officers are genuinely open-minded to doing better in this area. Are you open to that?
Yeah, I don't think I said anything otherwise, to be honest with you. So
You didn't, Dennis, but we got a lot of, here's everything we are doing. And the point was made that we think things could be better. So we can show and tell and showcase what is already going on at that scrutiny meeting when it comes. But I think there's an appetite for things to be better. So in that conversation, we can't just talk about what's already happening. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm. So Dennis, do you want to come back and Councillor Pavlovic as well?
Yeah, again, I think what I did say was that we'd welcome that opportunity to showcase what exists and have it scrutinised and develop on that. We wouldn't be the service that we are and that we want to be going forward if we didn't welcome that feedback and use it to develop and get better all the time. So yeah, absolutely. We absolutely welcome that opportunity.
Pauline, and then Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you. Just to add, I think you made or one of the councillors has made an important point about there are others in the city that manage social housing. What are their policies? What do they do? Could we learn from them? Our new Assistant Director of Housing is not from a local authority background. She's from a registered social landlord in Leeds, for example, and she brings a lot of experience and will support us in developing our approaches as well. So yes, we are a learning organisation and we welcome the scrutiny and learning from others elsewhere. And
I just would like to note that not every person that I've had dealings with who doesn't rent from City of York Council has been a happy person from a housing association point of view. So I think it's your home. This is going to be something that's going to really, it's hard to get this right. I think that the willingness has to be there to get it right. The money's not there to change bathrooms every 10 years, is it? Every 30 is a long time to wait for a new bathroom by any stretch of the imagination. But, there's swings and roundabouts to all of this. Sorry, Councillor Waller.
Thank you. I think specifically for the tenancy strategy, tackling antisocial behaviour is a priority. It's certainly a cause for a lot of the correspondence that I get, and I'm sure it is for others, where the activities of a household has a hugely detrimental impact on many around them. And if there can be something that gives support to those tenants, then I think that would be very much welcomed as a change of policy. And if there needs to be resource put into it, then explaining that, I think, would be very much endorsed by existing tenants.
Councillor Pavlovic.
Thank you, Chair. I'll address both the previous point and this one. That one of the things that Dennis did say that we're doing moving forward to try to get a much broader sense of customer feedback is this whole contemporaneous feedback report about how we're doing, particularly around repairs and maintenance. I'm a great believer in committees. I'm not just talking about this committee, I'm talking about committees in general. But there is a sense, and others may disagree, and I'm giving you my opinion, that very often people who join committees are very interested. They've got a real vested interest, and there is a lot of people that we never hear from, and that's been one of the things that we identified in the stock condition survey. You know, some properties that we never heard from the tenant from one year to the next. When we then inspected the property, there was a lot of work that needed doing, or in some cases, a small amount of work that needed doing, but really quite significant work. And it was just like, well, why didn't you? Well, I was happy. It's all right. I was used to it. But and it's about saying, how do we get the feedback from those people? That's the bit that I'm genuinely most interested in is, you know, we don't hear from you on a day-to-day level, or we do hear from you on a regular level. And if we've got something right, great, it's great. And we can mark it down, and we've got some positive customer feedback. When we haven't got it right and somebody's unhappy, sometimes they sit and suffer in silence and think, oh, well, the council, you know, they didn't even finish that job off. And by getting that feedback at the time, we can then say, no, turn your van round and go back and get this job right. And whether that's a contractor or whether it's a council employee. And I think then we'll find that we're both getting positive feedback, but also we'll save ourselves money in the long run, that we don't have to do a job 3 times.
Indeed.
Oh, and the point about antisocial behaviour, absolutely. Antisocial behaviour is one of the biggest single factors that cause dissatisfaction in where people live. And, you know, and Councillor Waller's absolutely right. We hear it on a day, you know, we all get numerous emails, not necessarily just about council tenants, but antisocial behaviour in the streets, antisocial behaviour in the parks, antisocial behaviour that make people feel uncomfortable in where they live. And you know, and Dennis and I and the housing officers have had many conversations, including with colleagues from social care, is, you know, people are complex, and we're seeing an increase in people who have more complex needs and issues, and that's why we're developing the neighbourhood. That's one of the reasons why we're developing the neighbourhood model, so that we can be more responsive, so that we can have a holistic wraparound support network to help those people that to live more independently, but also where it's clear that that relationships have broken down, that we can then make decisions about whether that tenancy can be sustained or can be sustained in that place. Does that help?
Yeah, I think. I understand what you're saying, Councillor Waller.
I think it would be helpful to see the strategy paper and how that's developing, and certainly demonstrate there's had input from a wide range of tenants, that it's answering the real situation that's faced by them in the roads that they live in.
And that's why we've brought this paper to you today, to get your feedback. And so we've already got consultation and identifying that antisocial behaviour. We need to link that to our existing strategies and maybe be clearer in that area. So this is why we wanted to bring it now, when it was in a malleable form, let's put it that way.
Just a supplementary, so Councillor Mason's been very patient.
Sorry, Councillor Mason. It's really just to follow up this conversation and had some experience within Guildhall of the issues around antisocial behaviour impacting tenants in council properties. And I like what I mean here, but I'd also like to hear just a bit more about how this policy and strategy is actually going to address that, or the aspects of it that haven't yet come to scrutiny or will be put into these documents before the decision is made. That's my sort of question, really.
Dennis.
Yeah. So I would say the tenancy strategy and policy isn't for sort of dealing directly with things like antisocial behaviour, but certainly we do have policies and approaches that tackle those. The elements that will sort of feed into that are the family intervention tenancies, which we've had a look at on a couple of occasions. So, for example, they might be used in a scenario where there is a family that is heading towards eviction because of the behaviour of members of the family or people that they associate with, but there are also vulnerable people involved as well. So it gives us an option to move people into a property on a licence with specific terms and conditions over and above those which would be in a standard tenancy, with less security of tenure and a wraparound support to be able to allow us to work with them to try and make a success of things. So there are things in that, and the fixed term tenancy elements, which you will see in there as well, can feed into that. And we may want to use that in very specific circumstances in the future. The strategy approach that we've set out allows us to do that in the future. And that will tie into things, other things that we're working on, like the tenancy sustainment strategy, which is about providing support for residents. That sits under the homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. It was a recommendation within that, which has been around for about a year now. And the policy team are leading on developing that as well. It's gone through some consultations, and no doubt it will come here as well. So you'll be able to see a little bit more detail about what we're doing to actually support people. And I picking up on Councillor Pavlovich's point, we house lots and lots of very vulnerable people, and some of the behaviour that this display is a result of some of the issues that they're dealing with and facing in their life. Some of it is pure criminal behaviour, and we deal with that with specific resources that we have available to do that. And we deal with that in a partnership way, so working with the police, mental health services, addiction services, Change, Grow, Live, etc. Around that, our colleagues in adult social care, children's services, etc. Taking pure tenancy enforcement action in the vast majority of cases just simply isn't appropriate. The courts wouldn't expect us to do that, and as a unitary authority would expect us to work with partners to deal with those issues and support people appropriately. At some point we will be reviewing our tenancy agreement as well, so so that it's fit for purposes and supports those approaches as well. And so all of those sort of themes tie in together to produce a landscape where that people are complex, absolutely, and services aren't there that used to be there 10, 15 years ago. So we have to make the best use of the services that are available. And that's certainly what the neighbourhood model will allow us to do going forward. And certainly I'm involved in conversations. We had the strategy meeting of the homelessness and rough sleeping group the other day, and it is pulling together strategic partners across the city around those. We're having some really sort of in-depth conversations, particularly around mental health and addiction services, which are at the heart of a lot of the issues that we face. We do a lot of work around county lines as well, which is ever more prevalent within the city. So there is, again, we're ambitious in this area. I'm not saying everything is perfect, because it certainly isn't. But what we are trying to do is work and get the most out of the partnerships and resources that we have, and to develop those, looking at things like best practice, utilising things like the mental health hubs that are developing in the city and exist, and making people aware of those. So that's how we're hoping to get better and make better use of resources going forward.
I think you can see that from the type of tenancies that you've got in here. Because at first I was thinking, oh goodness, what's this? And the more you read the paper and you realise why why are you using licenses, as it's a severe measure for severe behaviours, and trying to get people back on track, because in the end you're going to have to rehouse them anyway. So I think it's you're in a bit of a no-win situation at times with this, but I think you can see that the intention is good. Councillor Mason, you've been so patient.
That's fine. I've got a few questions and I suppose points. But the first one is just going back to engagement. It says about the member engagement process. I just wonder if you can tell us which members that was. One, I suppose, probably piggybacks off what Dennis was just saying there about types of tenancies and antisocial behaviour. But one it doesn't kind of cover is persistent breaches of tenancy rules. So again, I know it covers arrears and antisocial behaviour, and I guess you could call it antisocial behaviour, but I guess there's probably a gap in the middle where there's maybe a persistent breach of the tenancy or their obligations on tenants, but it's not quite antisocial behaviour, but it does impact on other tenants. I don't know if that can be looked at in terms of how that can fit into that. And then the last one is obviously, particularly, I suppose, tenants' obligations, and we see it particularly communal housing around vegetation and trees, and where there isn't any funding for the estate managers to allocate to things like pruning trees or whatever, but they do affect those kind of areas of communal laundry and washing where you hang it out. Obviously, with less ward funding that we had since it was cut, we might have paid for some of that work, and obviously we can't anymore. I suppose just more detail around that kind of heap placement scheme and what that might give us in terms of supporting those kind of estates and some of those communal challenges that where there's no real money for at the minute. Sorry, that's a lot wrapped up. That's all very different, but yeah, I guess the middle bit is just for noting. But yeah, probably the heap one and the member engagement process are the ones I'd like an answer to.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that question. Did you talking about the heap process?
Well, at the end, yes. I suppose question one is the.
Could you just explain what heap is as well, please, for people watching?
Yeah, so the Housing Environmental Improvement Programme, as it was brought in some time ago, member agreed, and it was about using a funding pot to make big, impactful improvements to areas of the city, decided on through consultation with residents. So, for example, if building on feedback we got through the tenant satisfaction survey, storage, particularly around blocks of flats, one-bedroom properties with not a huge amount of storage. We responded to that and put a storage programme in place. The idea is that if that's needed in a number of areas of the city, rather than each area doing little bits of procurement, we procure across a 4-year programme and deliver economies of scale on that to provide the fencing or the extra storage facilities, for example, that was needed. We're moving to a different approach, and this is probably where Councillor Paddle.
So the example that Dennis gave there was, in some respects, its biggest flaw. By doing economies of scale, and I can completely understand why that policy existed. Why buy one when you could buy 20 and get a discount, meant that there was such a long wait for schemes to be implemented that very often that tenant had moved on by that stage. And, you know, although Dennis said that HEAP was for large scale estate improvements, in essence, or in actuality, it was for really small scale improvements. And what the new neighbourhood improvement programme is for is to look at investing significant amounts of money to make bigger improvements into communal areas. And that will be via consultation with members and with residents. It's part of the reason why we're doing the walkabouts and why housing management officers are doing the walkabouts. That's part of the role of the cross-departmental work with public realm, for example. So for if it was around pruning of trees or grassed areas, broken fencing, certainly the ones that I've looked at in recent weeks, there's been a lot of broken, the low wooden fencing, and so the question is, do you replace that? Do you remove it? Those are part of the consultations that we need to have. And so it's about investing bigger amounts of money into doing more tangible things. So, for example, in communal paved areas, what we did see in a number of them were that the slabs were so uneven and cracked that people weren't really using them for laundry. So it's about saying, do we look at a bigger area? And that's what the programme will be moving forward. So I hope that explains what NIP's plan is, but it's certainly not to exclude members, but it's to actually deliver more fundamental work quicker than the previous HEAP programme.
Yeah, I suppose to answer the first question, which was about the document, obviously says that both these have been through the member engagement process, in quotation marks. So I just wondered what that process was and which members were part of it.
Not my reports. Oh yeah, no, I was, yeah. Yes, so maybe it was just me, I don't know, but I'll pass that over to Andrew.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, sorry, in essence, that's right. Yeah, we certainly consulted Councillor Pavlovich, and I suppose slightly self-referentially, I think that was also referring to, you know, engaging with People's Scrutiny Committee here as well, and you know, taking on board all the valuable you know, sort of insights and feedback that we've had this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Waller.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. It was to follow up the walkabouts issue. Because there's been a number, but it didn't feel very cross-departmental. There were a few, the estate manager would have been on their own if I hadn't turned up. And therefore, I hope that there will be a change of policy there, because I think it was very much everything that will fall on the estate manager, rather than it being a team turning up and someone from public realm or someone from repairs or someone saying, yes, that is something that needs sorting and I will ensure that it's sorted. Because a number of the points that were brought up in many of the walkabouts have been on haven't actually been followed through, and it's not a criticism of the estate manager. They've reported it into the system, and in one instance, a tenant in an upstairs flat was told to trim a communal tree, which seemed that there were some disconnects within the systems, and you've got one system on a tablet that estate managers have to use, but then the neighbourhood caretaker model is a completely different kettle of fish, and things get reported in a different way, and it's just not joining up in a way that is a constructive transformation of a local area in the way that it has been envisaged.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm pleased to tell you that we are more joined up now. So I won't labour it, but a little bit of history. We set out the ambition to do walkabouts in our annual tenants report, along with some other ambitions as well, and we got on with it. So yes, we utilised the Total Mobile app that we have available to us and developed some of the forms to aid us in our walkabout. So while we were doing that, colleagues and communities were also looking at doing some walkabouts as well. We didn't quite tie up at the beginning. We were having those conversations in it whilst we did those sort of early pilot ones. It was always the intention to tie up. So we've had those conversations now. We've taken the learning from the early walkabouts that we've done. There was a little bit of miscommunication when some walkabouts were happening in the same area, literally the next day. I know that your good self was included in some of those as well. But we've tied up those walkabouts now. It's a process of development, so it's not going to be perfect. We're extending the use of the technology to our colleagues and communities as well, and we're coordinating, pulling those files together. So we can do walkabouts till we're blue in the face. I think the important point that you raise is about something happening beyond them. So again, we're working with our colleagues in public realm, because a lot of these are public realm issues, our colleagues in building services as well, to make sure we've got the backup systems. Now, it's not going to be perfect from day one and for a little while to come yet. We've got the transformation team working with public realm as well, looking at streamlining the reporting mechanisms, because they have a whole host of reporting routes into that team, from ourselves, building services, the public, councillors, etc. So we're looking at how we streamline that. Again, a number of themes will come together over time to make this ever more effective, and we should begin to see some real changes through effective reporting and monitoring of those areas as well. You know, I've looked at some of the photographic evidence that we've seen from some of the communal areas, and there's a lot of work to do on those. There's a lot of investment that are going to be needed. So, as well as the sort of immediate repair issues and utilising the neighbourhood caretakers, which have had a tremendous impact on the areas that they've done. It's about utilising our estate workers better, existing estate workers better as well, but also what long-term investments do we need through cyclical maintenance in those areas as well. So again, bear with us. We have come together. We are sharing the learning from that. We are tied up going forward, and we will need to develop those plans to improve those areas, picking up on some of the issues that you've highlighted and that are coming out of those walkabouts.
Thank you. Councillor Pavlovic, and then I think we're going to
Yeah,
start.
I can make this point and the officers can't, is we're basically we're at a standing start. You know, if you just look at the tenancy strategy, it hadn't been updated since 2018. And the 2018 one was basically a cut and paste from the 2015 version. Introducing significant changes in the way that we're working, whether that's about customer satisfaction, whether it's about right first time, whether it's about a cross-departmental, silo breaking approach. You know, these things haven't been done by this council. And so, yeah, the start of every journey is a single step, and we will get things wrong as we're bedding this in, but it's the right thing to do. And I think there's a cross-party sense that, you know, these things are the right approach. It's just they didn't exist, and that's no criticism. That's no well, it is a bit. No, sorry, I'm lying now. It is a criticism, but it's because these are the areas that we've chosen to focus on, or that I've chosen to focus on, that I've worked with the officers, and I think we've come a bloody long way from where we were to where we are now, and where we're gonna be. In hopefully a relatively short space of time. So as I say, the office couldn't say that, but I can.
I think we'll look forward to having you back here and I don't after about 6 months or so, and see how improvements have.
Give it a year, and
yeah,
you will
okay.
really see the difference.
I just want to comment, but I don't want an answer as such, as to certain things that I picked up from reading it, and then we will close the portion of the agenda. So I'd like to see more and please don't answer on this now. Prisoner protocol, what you're going to do and how are you going to update that? And the succession terms for adult succession. And I was also wondering about a dependent disabled child or disabled sibling, perhaps, on succession. And vulnerable people who need to upgrade properties when their wealth declines. There's some things in there that are a little bit missing, and it would be a good thing to add a gloss it to put something more in. Sorry, it's getting late. And also domestic violence. If there are people that it's generally it's the victim and the children that move out, and the perpetrator stays in the property. But what happens if they don't want it to be that way? What can be done then? And also any sexual abuse cases where people are rehoused near to the abuser. What can we do? Can we avoid those sorts of things? And that's just from general background knowledge on housing. So, but please I don't want any comeback on that at this stage in the meeting. I think my colleagues might want to kill me otherwise. And I just want to thank you very much for coming along and listening to what we've had to say. And some of it has been a bit harsher than we would have, but you are open. I know you've said you're open, and I think it's been given in with good intent to improve things. And I think things are improving. I think these neighbourhood teams are really improving things. I've seen a lot of pictures, for instance, and I think the survey of the state of housing, it's all moving in the right direction. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and thank you very much for all your hard work and for the report, Andrew. Thank you. So we're going to, so you can leave us now. Are we okay? We'll be very brief. I'm not going to go over the work plan in great detail, which is the next part of the agenda. Just to note that the adult social care CQC report is to be added to the February meeting, and Councillor Waller, as Vice Chair, and myself were happy to agree to this. Informal scrutiny member briefing sessions listed on page 100 in the agenda pack. That item on healthy weight on the agenda for tomorrow evening's session, so don't miss that. And Councillor Waller suggested a task and finish group around housing repairs. Formal proposal could be brought to the next meeting. And any volunteers, so think about volunteering to be on a task and finish group led by Councillor Waller on housing repairs. So maybe I should let you say all of that. Sorry about that. Just so thanks everybody. Thanks for coming to tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've got to say Merry